Like him figuring out foreign policy, like watching his eyes kind of calculate it. It's like you're watching your dog like suddenly realize, oh, you could give me food anytime. Hold on, you always have the food sitting there? Like that moment your dog kind of gets it. This is actually something that the overall topic I agree with. Tucker Carlson has finally, after months, he said he doesn't agree with Israel's genocide operation. But I'm still going to kind of tear it apart because of his reasons. Anyway, it is interesting that even the far right wing of this country is now abandoning the idea that Israel committing a mass genocide is just cool. Even Alex Jones, as I brought you the other day, has said that Israel is even one eye over here, drool coming out of his mouth. Alex Jones says that Israel has gone too far. Let's play a little from Tucker here when asked about Israel's genocide operation.
U.S. aid, military aid to Israel, and the implied security guarantees, some explicit, but many implied security guarantees of the United States to Israel probably haven't helped Israel that much long term. It's a rich country with a highly capable population. Like every other country, it's probably best if it makes its decisions based on what it can do.
So he's basically saying Israel shouldn't continue this, or at least not at the level this genocide. He of course doesn't call it a genocide, but I love his he's just kind of like, it might 170 days of genocide. I don't know. Might be better if we stop sending them so many bombs, because they should just see what they can do on their own. That's the real reason we shouldn't send them quite so many bombs. It's like, let's just see what kind of genocide they do, just all by themselves, like big boys. I mean, using that as a reason for why you finally said this Israel should not continue, or at least the U.S. arming of Israel should not continue. And also, he does it kind of sheepishly. It's like, I guess, maybe, let's stop sending them so many bombs drop on kids, huh? And this gets down to motivation, which has been probably my biggest problem with Tucker Carlson, is even when he's saying something I might agree with, like, the Ukraine proxy war is a dumb idea. His real motivation is not, even though if he may mention the 100,000 people dying or something like that, but his motivation is never about people dying overseas. Like, he doesn't really care about other people dying. He clearly, you can tell by how sheepish he is about this, he couldn't give a shit about Palestinian children being blown to bits on a minute by minute basis. Instead, he's just like, do we really have to send them so many bombs? Because his motivation is not care for humanity. It's so clearly not. His motivation is the U.S. empire needs to hang on to all this power we have, and he thinks that we'd have an easier time hanging on to hegemony, hanging on to U.S. ownership of the world. We'd have an easier time if we just did it without, wasting all the money on Ukraine.
By itself, it's probably best if it makes its decisions based on what it can do by itself. And I don't see any advantage to the United States. I mean, I don't.
Actually, he admits it right there. All he cares about is advantage to the United States. I think we should stop shipping weapons to Israel because it doesn't seem to benefit the United States. What about all the children getting blown up? Doesn't care. It's not even on his radar. Like, at no point is he like, kids are starving to death. Could not care less.
It's important for each country to make its own decisions.
The other thing about Tucker Carlson is it's like watching a dog, like him figuring out foreign policy, like watching his eyes kind of calculate it. It's like you're watching your dog like suddenly realize, oh, you could give me food anytime. Like that moment your dog kind of gets it. And I know sometimes he plays dumb. He does a lot of interviews with people he disagrees with, and he'll just sit on the screen going like he doesn't understand what's going on. So I know he plays dumb a lot, but I've seen interviews with him that are, small interviews. So it's not his big platform. And he said things like, a few years ago, I realized the mainstream media they're not really telling the truth, or, they're kind of part of the problem. The idea that he just realized that, he's been in mainstream media since he was like 6. Having a little bow tie on. He was like 6 years old, and he's on CNN, hosting CNN shows. And just now he's like, I think mainstream media is kind of part of the problem. It's just crazy.
Again, I don't think you can overstate the lack of wisdom, weakness, short-term thinking of American foreign policy leadership.
So yet again, it's like we should stop sending missiles to Israel because it's not helping us, and the people that run things are not very smart. That's his reasoning. Not that children are starving to death right now. Not that hospitals are getting bombed.
These are the architects of the Iraq War, of the totally pointless destruction of Libya, totally pointless destruction of Syria, and the 20-year occupation of Afghanistan that resulted in a return to the status quo. So like of the Vietnam War, their track record.
And this goes back to he doesn't actually understand what's going on. And it's kind of funny because his comment is about how the ruling elite don't understand what's going on or don't know how to properly manage things. But he clearly has no idea as to why we collapsed Syria, why we collapsed Iraq, why we collapsed Libya. And yet they all are so clearly linked if you actually study this stuff. It all comes back to powerful countries going outside the petrodollar. And there are some other examples where we collapse countries largely because they are socialist. He mentions Vietnam. That had a lot to do with communism. In terms of the more recent ones he's mentioning, Libya, Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, these are countries that either have a lot of oil or have connections to a lot of that system and were going outside the petrodollar. Iraq went outside the petrodollar. Libya, Gaddafi, who was the friend of the U.S. and was paraded around as one of the good guys for a while in the early 2000s, Gaddafi started having in-depth conversations about switching to the African dinar, having an African currency for the whole continent. And Syria, same thing. You have a remotely strong country with a fair amount of oil that dropped the petrodollar. Tucker Carlson seems to have no understanding of any of this. It's just like, we failed in Libya, and we failed in Iraq, and we failed in Afghanistan. Like, no understanding of what's going on here. The U.S. ruling elite do not view what they did in those countries as failure. They don't. They may view certain aspects of it like as failure, like the fact that they ultimately had to leave Afghanistan and weren't able to put in a lasting puppet government, or the fact that Assad has not fallen in Syria, but the country is so destroyed that it's a success for them. These are viewed in the tiny ruling elite circles as successes. Syria, 94% of people live under the poverty line, meaning the entire country is starving and struggling and barely getting by, and that's what the U.S. wants to see. The U.S. still owns, quote unquote, roughly 30% of Syria, and it's mainly the oil and wheat areas. And the reason for that is not because we need the oil. We don't really need the oil. It's because they don't want Syria getting the oil, using that oil and the sales of it to build themselves up again and have big oil sales outside of what? The petrodollar. Getting outside of the petrodollar with large oil sales, that's the death knell for any country. You do that, we are gunning for you. And Tucker Carlson doesn't even understand any of this.
Their track record of the Korean War, even going back 80 years, is uninterrupted failures. I just don't have any confidence in those leaders to improve. When was the last time they improved another country?
See, he doesn't seem to understand the goal of the leaders is not to improve other countries. Like, you have to be so simple-minded to think that the U.S. went into Iraq to improve Iraq, or went into Afghanistan to improve Afghanistan. You have to be so breathtakingly simple-minded or intellectually just out to lunch that you think the goal of the U.S. was to improve another country. Of course it's not to improve another country. We have destroyed country after country after country. And of course, he's talking about the big ones where we actually invaded with boots on the ground. But then you have just dozens where it was destroying them in other ways. Countries like Haiti or Honduras or Guatemala or Chile or so many in Africa. it's like, yeah, we didn't necessarily send boots on the ground in all these. Some of them did have CIA on the ground, etc. But we've managed to destroy them anyway. We keep them weak. We keep them something that we can exploit, we can use. Sometimes we'll put in our puppet government. Sometimes we even fly a military jet in and arrest their president, like Jean-Bertrand Aristide, fly him to Africa and drop him off there, like we did in 2004 in Haiti. Anyway, it's like Tucker Carlson is this bizarre mix of just like sometimes saying things where you're like, wow, I can't believe a mainstream media person said that. Or like, he's the only segment I've ever seen on mainstream media, this is back when he was on Fox News, that connected the CIA, literally the CIA, to Jack Ruby, the assassin, the guy who killed Lee Harvey Oswald. And in the segment, he doesn't say it, but he's basically like, why would the CIA be linked in with all this? And did the CIA kill Ruby? And why would the CIA want to kill Ruby if we're supposed to believe the, government story? And at moments like that, you're like, wow, I can't believe this guy's on mainstream media. Of course, he's not anymore. But a moment like that, I get why he's celebrated. But there's so many other moments where you're like, this guy is super simple. And again, I think you got to look at the motivations. He is not motivated by helping humanity. His motivation seems to be what makes the U.S. empire stronger. And he does not believe that the Ukraine proxy war makes us stronger, or that sending arms to Israel makes us stronger. And so that's his motivation. His motivation is not, maybe we don't want to see 10,000, well, it's low now, actually, 14,000 children murdered in a matter of months in Gaza. He does not care about that. That's not his motivation.